Welcome to IdeaGen and the IdeaGen Catalyze Impact podcast. Today, I am honored to have with me Ilana Ron-Levy, Managing Director at Gallup. Ilana, welcome.
Thank you, George. It's great to see you. I'm honored to be here.
Always great to see you, Ilana. And, we've had the privilege of having you at IdeaGen in the past. It's been a little bit of time, and so much has happened, as we discussed in our pre-interview today here, in the world, in technology, and on and on. And so I'd like to first ask you, you've had such an incredibly diverse career spanning research, consulting, and leadership roles. What drew you to this field at Gallup?
It's such an important question. When I talk to younger people about their career trajectories, I always try to think about intentionality in careers versus sort of following your innate strengths and talents and seeing what that all leads to. Sometimes when you're 18, you just don't yet know which direction you'll go. But I've tried to be both very intentional and sort of taking stock of my own talents and my own strengths, thinking through what would be the best career path. I think I knew from a young age and in college that I was good at asking questions. I was good at, having a conversation and really trying to derive meaning and insight from that. Looking at a lot of information in a class, and instead of kind of using emotion to dictate what conclusion I would draw, really wanting to look at all sides of an issue and different data inputs and different sources. It took me, I think, until grad school and my first job out of grad school to understand, though, that applied research was actually a career, and that there was a way to be a professional researcher that was not an academic, but was using research and analytics and insights to have real world applications. And that first job really, I think, opened so many doors for me, because when you're working in professional services, even if it's about research, there's a lot of other competencies in play about business realities, working with clients, that give and take between really high quality research, but meeting the objectives of what a client is looking to get out, surprising them with discoveries, maybe sharing difficult truths, but still being a trusted partner and a trusted advisor. And I've had the privilege to work at 3 different research firms in my career, but I think that really binds that trajectory, balancing really high quality, rigorous research that provides insights, but building really trusting relationships with clients to help solve some of their toughest problems.
Incredible. And so, as you're overseeing public sector engagements at Gallup, what are some of the key trends you're seeing in government and in multilateral partnerships?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the first few months of 2025 has charted a new course for government with, a set of challenges. There's also a set of opportunities about delivering cost-effective value for the American people, really doubling down on mission, trying to understand what's core versus what might be extraneous. But I think, for our clients, what's been really exciting at Gallup is we're continuing to build on that mission of deriving and providing kind of world-class analytics and insights, but moving beyond that to really think about how do organizations use these data, use these insights to derive brand visibility, to deepen their own thought leadership on an important topic, to make organizational decisions, to have insights that can affect their own funding priorities for the future. So I think that that's really been something important to me and to our organization, to deliver the highest quality research, but to move and help our clients move beyond just delivering data to using those data to position their organizations and fundamentally change the way that they make decisions.
That's incredible insight. And I'd like to drive a little bit more into that, because we see, like you said, the opportunities with a more efficient government, et cetera. How can governments, Ilana, and organizations better use data? We talked a little bit in our pre-interview conversation about AI. How can government and organizations use data and insights to drive more efficiency, more impact, et cetera? How is, and you must be, you're at the cutting edge of all this. So I'm really excited to hear some of your insights in that world, especially in AI, et cetera.
Yeah, it's an important question. I mean, I think before we get to AI, which obviously is a part of it, a crucial part, I think fundamentally when government agencies and public sector organizations are conducting large scale social programs, programmatic interventions, I think that there's an obligation to the public to be using evidence and data to assess, are these programs working? And the whole kind of evaluation field, which started primarily in evaluating large-scale government programs at differing levels of rigor, really was born out of that, right? That if the government is going to be spending millions and millions and millions of dollars on social programs, it's important to understand, do these programs fundamentally achieve the outcomes that they are trying to achieve? And of course, in the private sector and our private sector clients, it goes without saying that if you're wholesale making a huge investment, you want to use data to understand the ROI. And that data can look like so many things. I mean, sales information, customer feedback, how employees are responding. There's a whole sort of scale of metrics that you would look at. So I think on the government side, I think the call to action is not just doing the research and the evaluation, but actually using it to make difficult decisions. You sometimes read stories about evaluations being conducted for 15 years, consistently showing that a program is not working to deliver its intended outcome. So I think that the call to action, of course, is how do you make sure you're not just doing research for research's sake, but you're doing research to drive better decision making? Now, on the AI side, what's really exciting is AI has the ability to democratize at very, very low cost a lot of elements of the data collection and even the data analysis process. So to give you an example, let's say historically focus groups or qualitative data collection, the unit cost tends to be high, the sample size tends to be low, but you can learn so much sort of exploratory information about a potential new product or how people feel about issues that can lead you to make really good hypotheses and then test quantitatively. Now with AI, suddenly you now have this world where maybe you could do thousands of focus groups. But I think that at a very, very low cost, I think that the question for organizations will be, how do you not get so awash in quantity that you're losing the ability to really derive meaning and insight? Because bigger doesn't necessarily mean that you're learning more. And I think that those organizations that use AI to drive down the costs of the process steps involved in research, and there are many, many, many manual, labor-intensive tasks that go with high-quality research, those that can use AI to drive those costs down, but still are laser-focused on having the right research questions, the right research objectives, and truly deriving meaning are going to be those that really are able to excel and succeed. So just because research will become more democratized doesn't mean that it's going to become more high quality. And I think that's going to be one of the challenges and the opportunities ahead that are really exciting.
That is really exciting, Ilana, and just, incredible to hear what you all are doing always at Gallup and how you're pivoting and always adapting. Right? That's what I find the most inspiring about your work at Gallup is you're always, at the cutting edge of the next thing. In this case, you're staying right attuned with everything that's happening with the technology that many have referred to as maybe beyond what the industrial revolution was in terms of AI, et cetera, and the impact thereof. And so I'd love to switch gears for a moment and talk about you and your service on the Next Generation Board for the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum and ask you, how has that experience influenced your perspective specifically on leadership and community service and impact?
Well, what's interesting is that kind of the specter and the impact of the Holocaust has always been something very important in my life. My paternal grandparents were both Holocaust survivors. They had very, very different journeys. My grandfather was a resistance hero who saved many lives, but was ultimately imprisoned in Auschwitz. And my grandmother escaped Nazi-occupied Poland into attempting to go to Romania, was caught by the Soviets, and was imprisoned in Siberia at age 17. And so both of them had these transformational experiences at an incredibly young age. Both lost their entire families and were the only surviving members of their families. And I was aware of parts of this history at a very young age. I think as early as kindergarten, I was starting to piece together this history and what this meant and how I could have these grandparents who, I was so close to in a normal, grandchild, grandparent experience of, go get ice cream and, just hang out. But knowing that they had this other part of their life that I would probably never really be able to fully understand. So I think it had a profound impact. It certainly had a profound impact on my father as well. But I think, just thinking about these big picture questions of how do you survive against the odds? How do you retain your humanity, your optimism? How do you trust people again? All of these, I think, very philosophical questions were things that I thought about really young in life. I think it probably did kind of tie into my career of why I like to talk to people and understand their stories and their perspectives. So when the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum opened, my family, we were very happy that it opened, supported the museum, visited the museum in its, first year of existence. And I think that as there's more distance from a cataclysmic historical event, there's more and more revision of the historical record. There's more doubting that something so terrible could occur. But fundamentally, you're facing a world where those firsthand survivors of the Holocaust who so powerfully shared their experiences, in this upcoming generation, that opportunity just won't exist anymore. So I was always very inspired that the museum featured so many volunteer survivors who told their story. the majority of the visitors to the Holocaust Museum have no personal connection to what happened. They come from all over the world. It's one of the most frequently visited sites in Washington, D.C. And that's just super, super inspiring to me. I see, kids waiting in line, not from school groups, but because they want to go, and families who are visiting Washington, D.C. for the first time and want to make this a part of what they're learning about. And I think I feel very committed to being part of that.
That's just awe-inspiring to hear how it's impacted you, how it's shaped you, and how it's affecting and, sort of furthering your leadership and perspective, which I think is all the collective part of this, and really drives into your work at Gallup, which I find, again, incredibly inspiring. And so, Ilana, looking ahead, you're looking at public sector research and global polling, and we talked about technology. What do you think will be the most important item? Let's just call it an item in the next decade.
That's a hard question. I think that, in the pursuit for effective and authentic leadership in a much more challenging, complex environment, I think there's a perennial search to understand what makes a good and effective leader. And we released, I think, a really groundbreaking study here at Gallup in February that looked at the global demands of leadership from the perspective of citizens across the world. I think it's the largest study of leadership ever conducted. And it asked people in close to 100 countries, who do they admire as the most positive leader in their life? And what were the attributes to explain why this was such an effective leader? And all kinds of different countries, different economic levels, different religiosity levels, you name it. And when we were able to thematically look across these thousands and thousands and thousands of open-ended comments, and we actually used AI to really accelerate the analysis process and merge AI into our traditional qualitative analysis methods, we were able to see that loud and clear what people were looking for primarily from leaders was hope. And that was the attribute that made the biggest difference in people's lives. And I think that is a really inspiring message. I think it says that if you're a leader who has to make tough decisions, deliver bad news, there's a way to do that that still provides hope for people, to say, we're making a tough decision today because that's going to unlock a better future for us moving forward. I think when you think about who wins elections and who loses elections, even if the outcome is surprising to certain commentators in the beginning, when you take a step back and say, who did the population feel provided a pathway for a more hopeful future, it can sometimes help to explain those dynamics. So I think that those leaders who are best able to navigate this really complex environment, lead through disruption, lead through change, but still inspire hope for a better future, are going to naturally build constituencies and followers. And I find that really inspiring, that was based on the perspectives of nationally representative samples across the world from countries and populations that are so different from each other.
Ilana, it's incredible that, we could, go through an interview for hours and days with all of the perspective and inspiration that you're providing and that Gallup is providing. And so I'll ask that we continue this interview at a later date as well for part 2, because there's just too much to capture in one interview. But I know that the millions of people that will hear and watch this interview will be inspired by you and your work at Gallup. Ilana Ron-Levy, Managing Director at Gallup, thank you for all you do. Thank you for your inspiration. Thank you for your leadership. And thank you to Gallup for all the incredible work being done globally.
Thank you so much, George. It was really an honor to be here, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ilana.
Thank you.